I don't know. Something tells me that this is a little wild. Just like something that I was just remembering about when I saw you pick up your coffee mug and it had this slight little turn that I could see. Something that I learned about 7 years ago with you. When was the last time you cleaned that coffee mug, Tim?
My wife will clean it every now and again. She'll take it away and throw it through the dishwasher. But I will say, like, my immune system is so. It just strengthens my immune system.
That's
my story.
Is it like a grill? Where, like, if you think about it, how clean are grills?
That's right. It's seasoned. I don't know if coffee's hot enough to really make sure that it's as clean as it needs to be. But, you bring this up at a time where, like with our guest today, I feel like I need to be sit a little taller, be on my very best behavior. Like that thing where, like, when someone knows they're being watched, that then their performance goes up and they're better behaved. I feel like this is going to be that episode.
Or worse. Maybe they do the opposite and they get too scared. I'm interested in the aspect of this with how you can learn to be better at body language by doing things, thousands of miles away. So we'll see. Rachel, good morning. How are you?
Good. How are you guys?
Pretty good. Okay, so your first thing that you said, you smiled and then you did something with your hands, like spirit fingers. Like, is that like tip one? Is that like tip 101 of, like, if you want to get people engaged, immediately do spirit fingers or something like that?
Oh, sorry. Can you repeat what you just said? It, like, you cut out for me, and I want to make sure I'm answering the right question and not what I want to answer.
The first thing you did was you were like, "Hi," with your hands. Is that? I mean, is that like a good tip? Like, engage people, immediately with spirit fingers or something?
Yeah, I mean, really, what you should be doing is like a dance and, like, different like cheerleader things. No, but actually, so. You did identify a few core things that can be leveraged when it comes to body language that help show your audience or whoever it is that you're speaking with that you're fully here, that you're ready to engage, that you're open and whatnot. And those two things tend to be, making direct eye contact, or as direct eye contact as we can, and then a display of your palms, like palms forward, tends to be a very trust building nonverbal.
Interesting. So this is going to be a really fun hour. I'm really looking forward to this, especially with when COVID kicked off and we weren't doing all this stuff. No one really knew how long this was going to stay until everything went back to normal. And now, video conferencing. Zoom Live. Pick a platform. That is the new platform that's here to stay for the long term. So tell us a little bit about your business and what it is that you do. I think it's super interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, thank you guys for having me here on your show this morning. It's very exciting. So at Virtual Sapiens, right, which is the name of my company, what we're doing is leveraging some of the new technologies we have, layering them on top of these tech-enabled conversations that we're having, right, over video, to provide people with insights on body language, nonverbal communication from that video communication perspective, right? So we look at this playground that we all have to show up in. We look at things like your setup. So are you framed properly? Is your lighting such that we can really see you as an articulate human? We look at body language cues like eye gaze, facial expressions, gestures. And then we also look at some of the vocal variety, right? So we're looking at a very comprehensive set of metrics so that we can help professionals really build awareness and update their skill set so that when they do show up on video, it feels more comfortable, it can feel more authentic, and at the end of the day, we can have a more human connection.
No, it's interesting, just as time continues to go on. Like at first, everybody had cameras on, everybody was talking, and it was accepted to have the dog walk by or the cat walk by or kids going past the background. And now it's like slowly more and more cameras off, cameras off, cameras off. And, nobody uses teleconferencing anymore. But it's just like, but everybody will still Zoom or whatever, but be cameras off. And it's just, I don't know. I just feel that I'm always cameras on, and there's a connection there that needs to stay.
Yeah. It's interesting. There is a huge debate waging out there around the whole camera off, camera on, divide, if you will. And it's unfortunately not really getting to the crux of the issue, right? Which is, it's less about camera on, camera off, and it's more about taking a step back and looking at the comprehensive communication strategy within an organization, right? If everyone's showing up to a Zoom meeting with the cameras off, it probably means that there are too many Zoom meetings that are happening, right? Some of them maybe should be communicated through asynchronous means, emails, some of them could be telephone calls, some of them could be a live document sharing situation, right? Like the moments where we do show up on video, it's wonderful when everyone can really be present and engage, with one another as humans. Not everything has to be a video meeting, and having a Zoom call with everyone having the video off, like that really does seem like maybe not the best use of the channel.
Well, real quick, Zack, and then I'll turn it over to you. But to follow on to that, I think that it's really a lot of a leadership thing. I mean, I just don't think that it's a good look when you have leaders of an organization that they have cameras off, and the rest of the people that are under them, so to speak, in terms of reporting, are all cameras on. I just think that that's something, to me, it's a leadership thing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're touching on a really interesting thing too, in terms of, as a leader, we want to mirror the behaviors that we'd like to see promoted throughout the organization. It's the same thing with requiring people to come back in the office. Meanwhile, some of the leaders or CEOs or whatever are in their like beautiful homes somewhere else, reporting in via digital means, right? Like these things should be a little more democratized. Choice needs to be leveraged in a way that makes sense. Flexibility needs to be leveraged in a way that makes sense. And definitely as a leader, I think you should show up in the way that you would like everyone to show up, whether that's video on, whether that's in the office, however many days a week. Yeah, absolutely.
I've heard this stat before, and I'm sure you have it more honed in on. What percentage of someone's there's a stat about body language has this much to do with how people, whether it's trust or listen or whatever. How high is that number? It's pretty high, right?
So, okay, yes. So the study I believe you're referencing is the Moravian rule, which is, it's like 93% is nonverbal, 7% is verbal, which would include exactly, vocal as well. So things like intonation, speech speed, pauses, and then filler words. That is a very misleading number, right? Because the study was done in a very specific context, right? And the study represented the degree of emotional nuance that was picked up on, right? And when you're talking, right, if you take like one sentence and you're like, I'm so excited to be here, right? And then you say, I'm so excited to be here, right? The words are not what's changing the interpretation. What's changing the interpretation are the nonverbals, the way that my face reacted, the intention. So that study is a very specific context. It would be illogical to say that in a stand-up meeting where everyone is sharing their to-do lists and it's all about really the content, that the body language is still at 93%, right? So nonverbals are hugely important, especially when it comes to the intention and the emotional nuance and context in a message. They can be game-changing, right? But it's very difficult to put a number to that.
Okay, so it being difficult, so it's not 93, but it's not 0. It's somewhere in between, and it's a lot.
Yes, it's definitely a significant piece of your communication.
I didn't know it was 93, so that or allegedly 93. But what I was going to say is that I think people forget that they're always selling something. right? Even people who aren't salespeople, right? They're always trying to get a reaction. They're always trying to get a specific outcome, and no matter what that is, right? And if they could improve their body language, or they can improve some feature to fix that, they could see a lot higher results, whether that be getting the girl to go on a date with you, getting the person to, supersize their Big Mac meal, whether that be to get a new job, to do any, to get someone to, agree to the graphic design that they just did, whatever those things are, that the body language in that, if it's positive and improved, I would believe, tend to like that person more and are more likely to agree with them. So you would think that someone would want to improve those things so that they can improve their percentages of whatever they're looking for. Or, I would think dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of times a day, we're trying to get approval on something. So why don't people, so that's a true statement, right? Like, these things are important in there, but then why don't more people put in the attention to try and fix this when it's basically their entire life?
I think that basically comes down to awareness, right? So we are all very used to the way we show up, right? We're used to the way that we hold ourselves, even just simply from a postural perspective. It feels comfortable, it feels natural, it feels authentic. So to think that we would potentially have to change some of the way we move or some of the way we express in order to achieve a higher level of impact can be daunting. Right? And unless someone is showing us, like, by the way, this is how you showed up and this is the impression that you sent, like, over and over again, it could be very easy to kind of ignore it, right? Because the other piece of the equation is the feedback. And yes, you might be having a less ideal success or hit rate, right? Whether you're a salesperson or maybe it's on virtual interviews, and you can't for the life of you understand why you're not getting hired when your resume speaks to a parallel along with everyone else's, right? No one's really going to tell you, oh, it's because, your lighting was so terrible, I could barely see your face, so it really was hard for me to trust you or to develop trust with you, right? Or for whatever reason, the words that were coming out of your mouth were not congruent with the way you were expressing them, so it felt a little off, right? No one's going to articulate that, and so it can be very difficult to even know that there's something you should address.
I can't, I'm just almost laughing inside because it's horrifying to me, like the act of listening. I mean, and so there's nothing worse than like when someone's taking a picture of an event somewhere, a speaker is presenting, and I'm like really actively listening to the point where I'm not even thinking about facial expressions, but I just have this really mean, evil looking face because I'm listening so intensely. And then when I see those pictures that surface on social media, I'm like, oh my gosh, I look
you have
horrific.
RBF, Tim.
Well, and I was like, and it's just like, is that something that you need to put in the back of your mind? Like, always look happy, despite the fact that I'm trying to listen more than I am trying to be happy.
Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah. So again, you guys are hitting on some really interesting concepts that have a lot of nuance to them when it comes to active listening, right? And for that matter, awareness of what our facial expressions, our facial muscles might be doing is a very common problem. Like, the number of professionals who come to me and say, Rachel, I cannot for the life of me remember to control my facial expressions. And so if I'm in a meeting and I don't like what someone's saying, like, it's very clear, or if I'm bored or like whatever. And, we get to this interesting point where you're like, all right, well, so does that mean that I should show up in a way that's like not reflecting how I feel? And then is that maybe not authentic and But at the end of the day, the questions we should be asking are, how do you intend to show up in that meeting, in that moment, in that conversation? And are you is your communication reflecting that intention? So to your point, Tim, if your intention is to, you are actively listening, you're hanging on to every single word that person is saying. And it would be so great if the speaker knew the effect that they were having on you in terms of your attention, right? It's less about showing that you're happy all the time, engaged, God forbid someone takes a picture. And it's more about, every once in a while, doing a small head nod, right? Or potentially like tilting the head just slightly so that it's obvious that you're considering what someone is saying. And then when it comes to your facial expressions, again, it's not about just being happy, right? Because that can be super unsettling for people. If people are like, why is that person just like grinning at me? And it's like super creepy. So, but what can be helpful is just a reset of the facial expressions once in a while, you know, so that we still see a little bit of that dynamic, engaged quality, but it's more about variation in facial expression than it is about like being, you know, happy or pleasant all the time.
Or if you just put your hands out like this and stare at him, I'm sure it'll be okay. Then they'll trust you even more. I want to get into that. I hope we touch on that at some point. But I have a tendency in conversation to arms crossed like this. And I've been told, you know, that is saying that you know, are not interested in this conversation. It's just comfortable to me, right? And so
That's what my
sometimes
daughter says.
I'll look at these people and say, hey, I'm very into this conversation. I'm not trying to be rude. This is just comfortable to me.
Yes.
Like, don't whatever. And so like kind of like to Tim's point is so that person, you know, it's not a presenter. It's, you know, maybe it's just like a friend or a family member or whatever. I literally will tell them, yo, I'm into this conversation. Don't be don't think I'm being, you know, disinterested in this conversation just because my arms are crossed. Like, yo, I'm in. And so it's maybe that 7% verbal is helping the 93% nonverbal in that case. But like, it's kind of so weird in those situations too, where it's the, you know, because some people I think with arms crossed probably are not interested, and that's fine. But I'm usually all in.
Right. So so in the world of nonverbal communication, like especially kind of more like the pop culture-y side of things, you know, there are many myths, right? And if you talk to any nonverbal expert, they'll be like, oof, yeah, we like have to, like another one is, oh, if someone looks at me and doesn't blink, or if someone looks away when they're talking, they're lying. Like some of these things are just completely not always true, right? And as you say, like crossing your arms is actually a very, I'm going to say this word again, nuance. It's a very nuanced posture, right? And absolutely, there are some times where it's very clear that someone says something and immediately you cross your arms, right? You protect your ventral area. You show a very closed nonverbal, and it's very strong. It can be a very strong message to the other person that like you disagree, you're not interested, you know, you're not really going to have a conducive conversation. That's one use case, if you will, of that posture. There are many other reasons why you might cross your arms. Number one being, as you said, Zach, that it's actually a very comfortable posture for many people, right? A lot of people, actually, I would say humans in general, right, from the time that we are born, care is expressed to us through touch, right? Skin to skin contact. When we're adults, we're not getting that same kind of reassurance and care through self-touch. And so we do it ourselves, right? That's why you get a lot of these kind of touching, right? When you see people kind of rubbing that's a very soothing act. It lowers our stress, right? So when you cross your arms like this and you're like, yeah, I don't know, it just feels comfortable. It's like, well, of course it feels comfortable, right? It's a soothing, it's a pacifying behavior. So when it comes to kind of decoding some of these messages, what we really have to take like as many pieces of information into context as possible, right? So if someone says something to you and you go, oh, interesting, right? We're getting a very clear verbal cue that this is interesting to you. We're getting a very clear head nod, which indicates that this is a positive consideration. And then we get the arm cross, which perhaps if it was paired with other nonverbals would not be a great sign. But given the fact that you have made this verbal cue and you are nodding your head, it's actually probably more of that, you know, display of comfort.
Fascinating.
Well, no,
wait, hold on. Fascinating. Yeah, gotta do all of them together, yeah.
So one of the things that I do find fascinating is the fact that reading up before the show and in preparation for this, you said that you've learned a lot of this and this behavior from being on stage. You're a performer, and when I look at, I'm a really, really big into music. That's one of the things. I mean, going to live shows, that is my jam. And I do it all the time. And the thing is that like the best shows, the best performances, my favorite artists, when they're up on stage, they look like they're just having the time of their life. They're just having fun. They're smiling. And that reflects back to the crowd, and everyone has a great time. Is that something that they practice? Is that something, I mean, because these performers, I mean, they're professionals. They make everything look so easy, but they've been at this craft for a really, really long time. Or is it a mixture of both, that they really are having the time of their life, even though they're playing the same song for probably the 20,000th time in a row?
Yeah. That's a great question. I think that's something a lot of performers it's like a nut that a lot of the professional performers try to crack. For me, like as a dancer, of course, my mind immediately goes to the Nutcracker, which was our like yearly production, huge moneymaker for the company, 43, 45 shows, and you were in every single one of them. Right. And the Nutcracker is not like a sad ballet. So you can't go out there and be like, oh, just as well I'm tired and sad, and so I can just, be sad. It's like, I'm a snowflake, and it's like the most exciting thing in the world, right? So I think, at least speaking from my experience, in those moments where, right, and I think that probably a lot of professionals who have to go into meetings, they don't feel like it, they have to do a presentation, they'd rather be in bed, whatever, right? Like, again, in those moments before you do the event or presentation, or performance, right? It's like, first of all, why am I doing this? Who am I doing it for? And it's almost in the purpose of it that we can revitalize the energy or the intensity or whatever it is that, you need to exhibit as a speaker in order to be effective. I think performers probably, of course, need to take that to the next level, right? Because if you're on stage in front of tens of thousands of people who are paying a lot of money to see you live, like that's a slightly different purpose from like, this is a team meeting and I have to, get everyone on board so that we can move to this next milestone or whatever. It just different degrees of intensity, but the idea is the same.
Well, the thing is that like, so I teach a lot of pitching classes for founders so that as they're learning to pitch, and part of the thing that we teach them is that, yes, this is a pitch, but it's also a performance as well. I mean, and so it needs to be memorable. Mm-hmm. This is your time on stage, and you really have to view this as a performance. So, and that's tough for a lot of people.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I mean, in a lot of the workshops that I used to do before, honing this new technology, the question of, authenticity came up, the question of like, okay, well, I'm not in this business to perform. These kind of tricky questions come up, and you're like, well, that may be the case, but at the end of the day, like as soon as someone is presenting to a group of people who are listening, and I think part of it is that people view performance only as like one definition of it, right? And it is more of that like musician, movie star, dancer, actor, whatever, and that's
someone who's getting paid for it, probably.
Right. Yeah. Right. And so you're like, I'm not an actor, I'm not a dancer, I'm not a performer, but that doesn't mean that there aren't elements of performance that you can leverage in order to, once again, be more effective.
Tim loves music. He's not lying when he says he goes to places all the time. I heard an interview with Zac Brown Band, and he said that when they started, someone asked him, he's like, you're just so great on stage, and all of you guys seem super energetic. And he said, when we started the band and we decided to go out on the road, no drugs, no alcohol the day of the thing. Or I guess not before or during.
Yeah.
And that was an important thing, because he's like, people are coming to see us play our music at our best. If we're faded because we're so screwed up on drugs or alcohol, like many performers in music do, then we're doing a disservice to our fans. And so I thought that was interesting too. Funny side note, every once in a while, if I'm about to do a performance, like I might have a beer or two just to calm the nerves of something like that. Yeah. But I appreciate him saying that and recognizing that they can do a heck of a lot better job for the people who are spending, $150 a ticket these days to see that. So that I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, no, I think it's a good point, because I think we can get very wrapped up in like strategy, like in the moment and like immediately leading up. But like overall, right, health, wellness, mental health, taking time to make sure that you're getting enough sleep, eating well, getting exercise, like doing something you love, like all of those things, like I feel like are like foundational to anything we discuss, right? Because, you know, it becomes harder and harder to like lift above not feeling well, not feeling good.
What is your background in all of this? How did you get into body language?
Yeah, so I mean, honestly, it was very rooted in my experience as a ballet dancer. You know, that world is completely physical. It's completely nonverbal, right? We don't go on stage ever and talk. And I retired in 2016 because of an injury. So it was not planned. You know, I thought I was going to dance for many more years. And a few months after retiring, got a job at Harvard in their fundraising offices. So very relationship driven. And just, it was almost like the sharp contrast between like a few months ago being on this stage performing, and then all of a sudden finding myself in this very like corporate kind of cubicle environment, that I noticed, number one, actually how like physical this new world was in a completely different way, and how much potential was being left kind of on the table because people were not really showing up and not embodying their lives as professionals. And so that was kind of a grain of like, oh, that's, you know, I feel like this is a very natural thing to walk in and engage and express and whatever. And other people around me aren't really doing that. And then, you know, like, what if I could maybe bring some of what I learned as a dancer into this new environment?
Yeah, I want to touch on the tech behind the platform that you have. So is it an overlay on Zoom or whatever platform you're using, and then is it nudge you, or like just remind you like, hey, your eye contact is off?
Yeah.
I find it fascinating. I would love to dive into that and hear more about it.
Yeah, totally. It is super cool, if I do say so myself. So we have two products right now. The one that I'll share first is the Sidekick, which is kind of our main product. It is a Chrome extension. You know, we connect to your calendar so we can tell when your next video meeting is. As soon as your video meeting launches, whether it's Google Meet, Zoom, Teams, WebEx, you know, we can tell all of those meeting providers are about to have an event within your calendar. So we auto launch the Sidekick. So if you're on Zoom, the Sidekick is like a little floating dashboard, if you will, very minimal, because we want it to be non-distracting when it doesn't need to be thought about, but visible when we need you to potentially course correct behavior, right? So Tim, you were talking about when you're active listening, right? Or actively listening. So one of the things, as an example, that the technology would do is, like, let's say you had gotten really focused on what the person's saying and you hadn't changed your facial expression, tilted your head, or given any indication that like you really are actively listening and present. So you would get a visual nudge. The symbol for active listening is like an ear with a little like graphic thing around it. And that would pop up and you would see it and be like, oh yes, yep. Like as a reminder to yourself. So it's a series of visual cues that pop up if we have detected a certain behavior is happening repeatedly over time. So it's not like if I like look away like this and then look back, it'll immediately flash, right? Like the behaviors have to be more of a pattern in order for us to like essentially give you a nudge. And then, you know, we give you encouragement as well. So if things are going, if you've corrected a nudge or you're on a streak, you know, our logo goes on fire. And so, you know, just to say, because I think earlier when we didn't have that kind of gamified approach, when people weren't getting nudges, they were like, is it still working? Or like, what's happening? Like, am I doing a great job or is it not working? And so now we're like, yep, it's working. You're doing great. Like, you know, don't change anything. Keep doing what you're doing. And then we have a series of like post-call analytics and progress tracking and all that fun stuff.
And is that subscription-based software that someone can just go ahead and is it a monthly subscription that for access to the extension?
Yep. And anyone can go to the website. We have a free trial, so you can install the extension, try it out. We like to say, give it a call or two to get used to, because it's new, it's something new to consider and think about. But yeah, it's kind of where that awareness piece comes in, right? A lot of people get a little bit like low scores at the beginning, and some people don't love that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like the coach.
So is this something that you could just open up a Zoom meeting or open up a FaceTime with yourself or something, and then practice and rehearse with this tool as well, so that you can improve? Like if you have a pitch coming up that you can continue to practice, get feedback from, and then improve your performance.
Yeah, definitely. It works on any video. Like I could have it on right now and be using it if I wanted to.
Wow, that's really cool. Because I tell you, because the thing about it is, and Gary Plague, if you're listening, he's a communications person, and it was painful, but it was really, really eye-opening as well. So we went through an exercise, and everything is recorded on camera. And then part of that exercise was you had to read out loud a children's story. And the way that you read to children is very, very different than because it requires so much emotion, and I'm just not like super filled with emotion. I'm pretty stoic, but then when I rewatched it, I was like, oh my goodness, and now even to this day, I try to I feel like I'm over exaggerating, but when I go back and rewatch those video clips, I still feel like I have to increase it 20x more. And it's just like, oh my gosh, it's just, so a practice tool like this would be, I see the value in it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's designed to be very flexible, right? Like you can use it in the calls themselves. If you're like, I need someone to remind me, otherwise I will completely fall into my habits. Or it can be used, you can launch it. It doesn't have to be tied to a calendar event. You can launch it whenever you want. Try maybe it's your pitch or your TED Talk or whatever, and just be like, I just, want to start building some of this new muscle memory around the way I would like to be coming across on video.
How do we get a copy of this video, Tim? Or should I just send you a children's book for you to record?
Yeah, I'm going to start doing those weekly. I'll set up my own YouTube channel, and then we'll come up with a title for it.
I've sat with Gary before and done something similar. Now with a children's book, I think we just reviewed a performance or something, and I remember that being and I've done thousands of performances. I remember that being a little wild. I can't imagine you reading a book. This sounds great. I've never heard this story, but I'm excited. Before the pandemic, I always encouraged people who wanted to get better at performances to be on stage, things like that, to just open up Facebook Live and go live and talk to the screen, and they can learn a lot from that perspective. What's interesting is I think that's maybe changed a little bit because we're doing so many of these Zoom style calls, but other than doing more performances, which can be very difficult for someone to obtain because people don't want to watch a bad performance, if you will. What are some strategies that people can do to improve their actual on-stage performance?
So it's interesting because I think a lot of that improvement can come in two ways. Number one, a lot of it is in the preparation, right? And the practice, and all of those are happening before the live event. Things like, whether it's for example, when I was practicing for my TED Talk, I would read the text over and over again without worrying about any of the other layers of performance, but just to get the base of it in my brain, right? And then you start adding these other little pieces. And so as you add new pieces, the part that you were rehearsing before, you don't have to think about anymore, right? I think a lot of the anxiety that comes in performance is when people think about every single thing that has to be executed on simultaneously in order for the performance to be successful. If you break down the rehearsal process, then you can layer things one on top of the other in such a way that feels a little more natural, feels a little more approachable, right? So that's kind of one, yeah.
Can you expand on that a little bit? Because this is one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, in preparation for that TED Talk, how much preparation time went into that? I heard a stat. Is there a stat like 1 hour for every minute or something? It's some crazy number, but I'm just curious how much prep time went into your TED Talk.
Yeah, I mean, that was, dancer over here, so I'm not like necessarily used to doing these talks that are scripted, right? A scripted talk to me, like I can talk all day, like as you said, Zach, on Facebook Live, whatever, no problem. But a scripted talk is a very different thing. So I think all in all, it was a period of like 6 weeks prep. And that included, writing out the first draft, like honing the draft, going back and forth a lot with some coaches on like the structure of it. And then, I mean, to me, the most interesting part is like, once you're like, okay, this is the content, great. The next most interesting part is like, okay, so how do you make that content come off the page? And that was, at least for me, my process is it has to be doing, and as crazy as I might seem when I'm doing it, just like literally talking to myself in a room for however long it takes to get it to the point where it feels natural and doesn't come across as scripted, right? That's the most intense process. And it's kind of interesting because I think that process needs to be executed to a certain extent for any kind of keynote or anything like that. And the number of people I know who are so focused on writing the content and then less so on bringing that content to life, you're like, no wonder so many presentations fall flat.
That's really interesting. It seems like so much time is spent on creating the slide deck and zero time is spent on what it is that the message that people are actually going to remember. Do you have any basic guidelines or suggestions that you share with people in terms of preparation time versus PowerPoint time or whatever platform you're using to create slides?
Yeah, I mean, the time like ratio is a little tricky for me. I don't have a hard, like, as you said, like 1 hour per minute. I think a lot of it depends on like the length of the presentation, but one like good test I would say is that you should be able to go through your entire presentation in your mind, knowing which slide comes next when, so that when you're presenting, right, what people don't see is, and that's why you have to do X. Moving on, right? Like you can't, that's not like, it's, even if it's on video, it is so obvious when you're reading from a script or reading from slides, like you want to have the confidence of that direct eye contact, looking into the lens. Like, yes, you're breaking it once in a while to make sure that it's a nice cadence, but what you're not doing is predictably reading the slides.
It's all so fascinating to me. And it's so difficult. And I mentioned it before, but professionals, they make it so easy, but what people don't see watching this is how much preparation went into it. And Zach, you and I have talked about it, that Shark Tank was great for the entrepreneurial community, but it was the worst thing for the entrepreneurial community as well, because they just made it look so easy that anybody can pitch. And
well, those are 2 hour long pitches too, that they throw into 3 minute pieces, which is like,
wow,
that's a completely different animal. I mean, it's also production, it's entertainment. People forget about that. There's so many aspects of it that are difficult for people to fathom or to grasp. And a good job on the production company for making people not recognize that. But I remember I haven't done an on-stage pitch in a while, but I used to do a lot. And at some point I realized, actually through interviewing someone, he was like, why are you creating a new talk for every audience? And I was like, I don't know. I feel like I'm supposed to. And he was like, look at this musician. Look at this comedian. The content is the constant. The audience is the variable. So then at that point, I was like, screw it. I'm creating one deck, and it's the only deck I'm ever going to do again. Maybe like subtle changes in there, but you also get a lot more comfortable with it. Now think about it. If you don't do that and you change it every time, it's 2 variables in there. You're constantly changing that. And the amount of time, if we think about, you know, if Tim's stat is correct, or just anything from a preparation perspective, that's a crazy amount of time to try to get comfortable around something, when it's like, if you get comfortable around this one thing and then the audience changes, who cares? Let the audience change. But I'm doing the same performance every single night. And so that was probably like 7-8 years ago. And I was like, wow, like I feel like a donkey. I don't know why I've waited so long to like figure this out. And it was earth-shattering information that was provided to me. So.
Yeah. It was a classic overachiever over there.
No, not an overachiever in any kind of way. Nope. Oh.
Are you bootstrapping this, or have you raised capital for this venture? How's that going?
Yeah, no, that's our journey has been like 50% bootstrapped, and then we've done a small pre-seed. We raised on a safe. We have a few things coming up in the fall that are going to be exciting. You know, some of them come with funding as well. So from a funding perspective, it's been no VC, right? No VC to date. Angels, friends and family, and then bootstrap.
Is this your first business that you ever got into?
So yes and no. It's definitely the first like startup tech company, scalable, like potentially like large business. I had a consulting practice that was focused on nonverbal communication coaching and body language coaching before, called Choreography for Business.
Interesting.
Do you find that selling something that, I don't know how to say this, what you do reminds me of, we had a previous guest, his name's Danny Rubin, and he sells what he calls soft skills to people, because soft skills aren't taught to people, or they're not taught in like growing up and stuff like that. I feel like this is a soft skill, but it's a really important thing, right? And so he was like, I have to teach these people to want to buy my thing. And they don't even realize that they need it, but it's the reason why they're not getting to the step that they want to in their careers. Are you finding that it's difficult to sell this thing that people don't even realize they need? Or has the pandemic maybe changed that, where people realize, oh, I need to get better at this so I don't look like Zack Miller talking on this screen?
So definitely more when I was doing Choreography for Business, and that was more of like the in-person, workshopping, facilitation, that felt a little more like there was more education around it. With Virtual Sapiens, it's been really interesting. I think because people have been forced to watch themselves, unless they're hiding their self-view, which I highly recommend. Right, you kind of become a lot more aware of like, oh God, is that how I look on video? Like maybe I should, I don't know, change something or whatever. Or people are just very frustrated because the video experience feels flat, and the things, interestingly, the things that we say we will help people improve on, people are like, oh, I see people do that all the time. And so again, I think our challenge is less in kind of educating people that this is a need, and more in helping people be aware that, oh, actually, like not only is this something that I could see a lot of other people using, but this is something that I actually could probably use myself.
I'm curious, if the platform, does it detect or notify you when you use certain filler words?
So no, we don't do, everything is a computer vision problem for us. So we don't do any transcription. So filler words, word choice, like different topic words, we wouldn't do that.
Gotcha.
We're looking at partnering with some companies who do that. It's essentially table stakes at this point. Like everyone has some kind of transcription service, so we didn't feel like it was really worth our time to
make sense.
Do that.
Yeah, it's one of the tips, real quick, Zach, that we use is that and again, we work with a lot of founders. So going back to like practicing pitches, say your pitch, use the voice to text dictation, and then highlight all your filler words and like when you see and when you like, as I just did. Highlight all those filler words and the whole page is yellow or whatever color highlighter you have. You're like, oh my goodness, I had no idea that I was using all of these filler words.
Yeah. Yeah. The filler words it's always glaring.
And there's always a new one there that I went through a stage and I feel as if that I cut that one out. And the next, another one that I don't know how to get out of it is, and it's just like that. And I hear a lot of people using that same filler word. And I'm like, gosh, I have to stop. But
yeah, for me, it's right.
Groovy.
I'll be like, blah, 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 right? Blah, 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 blah.
Is that because you're asking for an affirmation of that or whatever? Are you asking for
like
approval?
it's my rhetorical way of like checking in and moving on. So it's just like saying, that I say right.
Another one I use is and other people use as well as so. It just starts something off. So, and it's like,
when you say so, though, that you then have to repeat it with sew a needle, pull and thread from
right. That's right.
That movie, and then that'll probably fix it because then you'll never want to say that again. I just made that up. I'm working on my comedy. I thought that was pretty good. I can't even think of the movie, Sound of Music. Filler words. Well, I'm trying to read something.
Okay. I thought that you were trying to come up with a thought because I was just curious. Like, is it difficult for you to watch? Like, when you are watching something, does it take away from the entertainment value or are you able to take off that part of your brain and just enjoy the entertainment for the entertainment, or do you?
It depends. I think if someone is doing something that is just really not helping them, it becomes kind of like one of those like an obsession where you're like, wow, like I want to just like reach through the camera and like fix the lens and then be like pat on the back and like, as you were, because it's like, all I can see, like if someone's like too close, man, so many people get so close and it's so uncomfortable because it's so intense for the audience, and I just, so some of those more like framing things really get on my nerves. But when it comes to like hand gestures, things like that, unless it's like a glaringly terrible situation, I can usually kind of shut that part off and just try to enjoy.
If someone had something stuck in their teeth, would you tell them?
I'm bad at that.
That's basically what that's basically what Virtual Sapiens does, right? I mean, it's basically saying, hey, you get something in your teeth, you need to fix it.
Yes.
Come on, if I had something in my teeth, you wouldn't tell me that's ridiculous. Even if I just met the person 3 seconds before, I will tell them.
You would? Wow, it's a
great icebreaker.
You're just a bigger person than I am. I randomly feel like if I were to stop the conversation and tell them in front of everyone, that I would just make it worse than them having it.
You don't think everyone's saying that to them? Anyway.
Oh, for sure. For sure. This is one of my greatest faults.
It's okay. We forgive you. So when we first learned about you, we have you fill out this form, and I thought this was really interesting, and I want to break it down a little bit. You talked to the question is, please tell us about your business. And it's Virtual Sapiens is like Grammarly for body language and presence on video. And then there's another sentence, but I think that first sentence is really critical. What iteration of that are you on that? And then the Grammarly piece to that, you see filler words. A lot of companies, thousands of companies will say they're the Uber for whatever. They're the whatever for whatever type of company. You've done something similar in saying, hey, we're the Grammarly for body language. Do you find that people gravitate and understand what Grammarly is? Like, how did you come to using another big brand to use to enforce kind of what you do?
Yes, we came up with that through feedback from people we were talking to. So we would explain what the business was and how it worked and how the technology worked. And almost it's crazy to say, but almost unanimously, as soon as people actually understood it, they'd be like, oh, so it's like Grammarly. So once that was established, we decided to leverage it. However, we try not to depend on it, and we don't use it publicly, if that makes sense. So we'll use it in applications, and we'll especially use it in some of those more tech forward applications where they're like, 50 characters or less. I'm like, all right, this is what it's like.
It was effective though.
Yeah, because it is effective. But I prefer not to be comparing to other things all the time. I also think that like it's a great conceptual comparison, but at this point in how we've evolved, like we've evolved into our own thing now, and I want to be cognizant of that. So it's catchy and it works, and I haven't had anyone say what's Grammarly when I say that to them. We're not putting it up on our website. I think you'll also maybe you may have seen other companies use that same analogy. We're like Grammarly for this or Grammarly for that. And I'm like, okay, so it's not super original, but.
Well, at some point, as you become a bigger brand, you have to remove that. I would assume you have to remove that from the situation because you don't want to promote someone to get to the other. But yeah.
Yes. I mean, there are other ways. Like the other day, I was looking at another founder's website, and she used the analogy of she's a legal search platform, right? So as a lawyer or a judge, you could search her platform for any case and decision. And she's like, imagine if you could Google any legal case or legal decision. And so she used the Google analogy, but instead of saying this is like Google, but for law, she uses it as like the verb. So, you could be like, imagine if Grammarly also did body language. Then it's a little bit less of that, like X for Y formula. Yeah,
I didn't realize that Grammarly was so big. It's interesting to hear that no one has ever come back to ask what Grammarly is. I'm
use also shocked by that. Yeah. I mean, I know what it is. Yeah.
But I think that I find it really, really helpful. So every Monday when I get the report from Grammarly that tell you these were the most common mistakes, or this was the mood or whatever, however they describe it, of which you communicate in, I find all that stuff pretty insightful and helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
How's the Boston scene? Or are you there to stay for a little while? Are you were in Boston, have left Boston?
Yeah, so the company is based in Boston, Massachusetts, but I was in Boston for 16 years, and through that time was a professional ballet dancer, and then a fundraiser, and a food writer, and then now an entrepreneur. And I kind of was like, when the pandemic hit, I was like, I need to get out of this place. And so my husband and I we're digital nomads now. So we travel around to different cities and we install ourselves in an Airbnb. I rearrange the furniture so I can have a nice Zoom background. And currently we're in Toronto, which is where my family is. And we'll be going to Portland, Maine for the fall, and then potentially Miami. So, I'm in and out of Boston. In answer to your question, which I think might have related more to like the founder startup ecosystem, I think Boston's thriving. I think that there are some amazing players in the space. Allison Byers from Scroobius being one of them, who are total champions and game changers when it comes to inclusive, kind of diverse representation of founders. And that's really special. I think other tech scenes, like the one that's in Miami, for example, are like way more hypey, which can be fun, but can also be distracting. So I do find Boston's a pretty honest place, and there's a lot of really supportive activity going on there for founders.
The thought of the digital nomad life sounds super cool to me.
It's great.
What's your short list of places that you want to go to, other than Portland?
You
said Portland, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what I mean.
Yeah. We did 100% fall in love with Miami. So we will be going back.
So the hype is real then, but just too much hype.
The Miami hype is super real. However, the hype that I'm into is like understated in the sense that like people go to Miami and they want to do all like the club restaurants and, you know, like South Beach craziness. And I'm like, actually, that's like not where it's at. There's like all this really good food, really great coffee shops, amazing art, like not on South Beach and like a little more north. So there's a lot to explore there, but I do love Miami. We flew to Lisbon for a weekend on our way to the south of France. And Lisbon is a super cool spot. Like I'd love to explore more of Portugal in general.
Interesting. Yeah, I that could be something I would be able to do.
Are you going to be a digital nomad soon, Tim?
Time will tell. I mean, we would stay here in the.
Well, sure.
In this
you have
area.
A home, right? But
yeah, we're not we wouldn't sell our home and then live out of the car, or, you know, live out of city to city or whatever the case is. But I definitely could totally, I can get down with it.
Yeah, it's great. It's really a fascinating exercise. You learn that you don't need all this stuff. You learn very quickly what you do need, right? What you do need, you absolutely need high speed internet. You need a quiet place to do your calls. You need like one nice coffee mug. You need a really good like coffee situation, you know, like whatever it is that you need. Maybe you need some music situation. You know, I need a place to be able to move and work out. But once you figure those things out, you know, it's amazing how you can kind of plop yourself into different locations and be okay and experience new cities and experience yourself and your partner in new cities and with new energy. It's very fascinating.
How about you, Zach? You see yourself doing that?
No. As I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, I'm like, I don't mind traveling. Like I enjoy traveling a little bit that I've done, but I'm like, okay, like I have things that I feel like I'd have to move with me in those things. So like I don't have kids, but I have 2 dogs. So like what's going on with the dogs? If we had kids, like would the kids have to cut? Like, you know, your kids, Tim, are almost old enough where that's why I said in a couple of years, or I was thinking in a couple of years, you know, it'll be there. But for me, I'm like, okay, I got a 1 and 2 year old dog.
Yeah.
It's hard enough to find someone to watch them for a day to go to a wine fest. I mean,
yeah, for sure. No, that I mean, you'd have to bring that poster behind you too, obviously, right?
Well, yes, I can roll it up. I mean, I have one in my backpack already. There's a folding one. I have one laminated. Also, I have his tattoo.
Yeah.
Oh, it's this side right here. Yeah, no, I don't. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a situation. You know, it's not.
I think it would be fun to do something like that.
Yeah.
I just saw there's a cruise that is like 200 days, and I don't remember who's doing it, but it's stopping at 160 different locations, and it's kind of expensive. It's like 50, 60 grand, but it's you know, it's stopping at all these locations across the world, and I was like, well, that'd be kind of cool. And then logistically, you think about, okay, like. Yeah, you're going to get this done.
Rachel, what's the longest you've stayed in an area?
6 months. So we were in Miami this past year for 6 months. Before that, it was like between 1 and 2 months.
Were you there for Miami Tech Week and all that stuff? Or
yeah.
How was that?
Great. I mean, it was great. It's just so much energy around. Of course, there was a lot of Bitcoin and crypto activity and, you know, cults and like all that stuff going on. And so that was, you know, fascinating to just watch.
Oh, I forgot to ask. Okay. So why is my hands out like this? Why does that show that I'm trustworthy?
Okay. So.
Fill the word.
Yes. However, I think it served a purpose. So there's the main thing, I guess the science or the anthropology or whatever behind the palm of your hands being a very strong signal of trustworthiness is that you're essentially showing someone you have nothing to hide, right? There's nothing in your fist. This is also just an aggressive move, right? So this would be aggressive. Pointing is very aggressive. The backs of your hands are fine, especially if the hand is open. But if you were to be doing something like this, it would also be sending mixed signals to the other person. So this is the cleanest, fastest way you can show people that, I am here present with you. I'm not holding my cell phone. My hands aren't hidden below here. I could be like saying yes and typing, or I could be like playing on my phone, or I could be, I don't know, with a widget spinner or whatever, which is fine. But this basically is just the fastest, most efficient way of showing people that you're fully here, present. You don't have anything to hide. It's a very like honest, open, genuine display from a nonverbal perspective. Now, I will say, this is not the only way that you can do that, right? Because this also ends up looking like, oh, like you caught me. So there, a palm open and forward gesture like that can be helpful. One hand can be nice. I did that because I do tend to exaggerate some of the nonverbal cues that I like to use just to make them very obvious. But I also was really excited to see you guys. So,
as everyone.
I have one. I totally agree. One last question for me as we get ready to wrap is, so when you, I don't watch much media, but after there's some sort of interview that's done, and then they have then they have a body language expert to analyze the performance of the interview. Is there legitimacy to that, or is that all about how can I have someone watch this segment just a little bit longer?
It depends on who the expert is. Honestly, I think that there are some amazingly accurate and insightful people out there who have the focus of body language. I would say, if anyone is coming out and saying, they did this, therefore they are lying, or
right.
I would immediately not really trust what they're saying. However, if someone says, what was interesting about when they said this is they exhibited these behaviors, or there was a big change in the way that they were coming across. They started all open and confident, and then by the time they were being asked these questions, they got smaller and retreated. People are noticing trends and not making judgments, but just saying that was an interesting thing to notice. I would be curious as to why that happened. Some theories might be, or my hypothesis would be this, because at the end of the day, I think being aware of people's nonverbals, maybe you establish a baseline when the person's comfortable, what they look like when they're comfortable, and all of a sudden something changes. Like, it's about recognizing what happened right before the change. Like, why might that have happened? You can change your line of questioning. You can become more insightful with the way that you relate to someone if you're paying attention to these things. It's not about making snap judgments based on, if someone smiled or blinked or looked away.
Fascinating.
Is there anything we haven't talked about today that you want to talk about?
I can't remember if you asked this question in the thing. I feel like you did, like pastime, like favorite hobbies or something. Didn't you guys ask that? Like, what did you ask that?
I'm sure we did.
Typically, we'll ask, what is something interesting that most people don't know about you?
Yes.
Oh, maybe that. Well, anyways,
what is it? Yeah.
Well, did I mention these?
About the thing that's really interesting was the. No. We touched on that. I saw the word roller coaster, and then I was like, and then all of a sudden I was like, whoa, yeah. But I had to reread that. But yes, entrepreneurship.
Do you like roller coasters?
I used to love them. Now I'm like, absolutely not.
Favorite roller coaster ever? What is your favorite?
The one I'm on right now.
Oh, God. What a lame answer. The one at an amusement park. What is your favorite roller coaster of all time? Do you have one?
Yes, I think it's at Canada's Wonderland, and it's called
the
Monster, and it's all wood, and it doesn't go upside down, but it's got one of those like classic drops right at the beginning, where it just like really slowly brings you up.
Is that in Toronto?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's
what's yours?
A favorite roller coaster? I
Yeah.
really like Apollo's Chariot at
Yeah,
at Busch Gardens, just because I like the negative G's, and it's just a really simple roller coaster. It's nothing over the top, but it's a lot of fun to ride.
Yeah.
So you've been to Toronto's or Canada's Wonderland, Tim?
Yeah, because I grew up in the Buffalo, New York
Right.
area, so we'd always hear all the Canada's Wonderland advertisements on the radio and such.
That's rad. Well, Rachel, it's been absolutely wonderful chatting with you. And we look forward to having more conversations in the future. Best of luck. And how's my body language? Is it okay? Like,
Yeah.
am I doing all right? Like,
You guys are doing great. You guys are really doing great. Thanks so much.
yes. Bye.